This is the Sal Greco Show. This is our second episode. I hope you enjoyed the first one last week. That's the inaugural one. And listen, going forward, I understand there might be some kinks. There might be some things you see and you go, hey, that look a little off or whatever. I mean, look, I'm new to this part. I'm trying my best here. I'm going to get better as this goes along. But at least my main priority here is putting out the content, getting the guests, getting the information out so you all out there can view it, can see it, can listen to it, and you make your decision on things. One of the things we're looking at today is the SCOTUS ruling that we had was actually in favor of President Trump. So we'll just get to a couple of facts here. So the Supreme Court has issued a unanimous ruling allowing President Trump back on the 2024 ballot in Colorado. The unsigned order found that only Congress and not individual states can disqualify candidates for federal office under Section 3 of the 14th Amendment, known as the Insurrection Clause or the Disqualification Clause. The judgment of the Colorado Supreme Court cannot stand, the order read. All 9 members of the court agree with that result. This comes right before Super Tuesday. So joining us now to discuss this is the chairman of the Colorado Republican Party and candidate for Colorado's 5th Congressional District, Dave Williams. Dave, welcome to the Sal Greco Show. How's everything going?
It's a great day. Thanks for having me, Sal.
It's an honor to have you on. So, first thing I want to ask you, Dave, is what do you make of this ruling?
I'm happy that it came. Truth be told, this case should never have gotten to the Supreme Court. The fact that the Democrats and Joe Biden and his surrogates can engage in this lawfare against Donald Trump just shows you why we need Donald Trump back in the White House so that we can start to turn things around and get things back to normal. At the end of the day, the American people should be the ones voting for the candidates they think are best, and that's it. That should be that simple, but apparently it's not when you're a Democrat.
So, Dave, what are your predictions about Super Tuesday? What do you think is going to happen on Super Tuesday?
I think Donald Trump's going to win every Super Tuesday state. This primary election is over. Nikki Haley, needs to drop out for the good of the country. We gotta rally around Trump and defeat Joe Biden. President Trump had remarks just about maybe an hour ago or so, and he said it himself. Joe Biden, if you want to win this election, stop using prosecutors, stop using judges and lawfare. Come make your case to the American people. And he's right. And that's what we need to do if we're going to turn things around and change up the White House in 2024.
Dave, you're running for the Colorado's 5th Congressional District. When did you announce to run? How did you announce to run? And how's the race shaping out for you? How's that looking?
Well, we think it's going great. We just got the endorsement of Vivek Ramaswamy. He's come out and endorsed us. There's other folks that are going to come out in the next week or so that are going to endorse us as well. Truth is, we're the only pro-Trump candidate running in the race. We're running against someone who endorsed and supported Nikki Haley. And we want to make sure that the voters understand, look, there's a real choice here. Are you going to elect someone that's going to back up Donald Trump when he's in the White House? Or are you going to elect someone who's going to engage in sabotage? That was the main problem for Donald Trump the first go around, was he didn't have enough support. There are a lot of Republicans who are working against him, and we got to get that right for 2024 and beyond. So that's why I'm running. Washington is broken. I want to partner with Donald Trump so that we can turn things around and push forward the America First agenda.
I'd love to see you there, David, because D.C. just voted for Nikki Haley. I guess the primary is over. Nikki Haley's a champion of Washington, D.C. Apparently, it's over. I saw the newspaper headlines today before the SCOTUS ruling. Nikki Haley wins D.C. That's like a big event that just happened. This is a crazy time we're living. Well, right. Dave, one final question. So, is there any feedback in the street in regards to this ruling as far as Colorado goes? What are they saying in Colorado now that the SCOTUS has ruled in Trump's favor and he has to be back on the ballot?
I think just normal everyday folks are pretty unified in this, that, hey, regardless if they support Trump or not, don't mess with our right to vote for whoever we want. And that's the biggest takeaway here. You could support Trump, you could oppose Trump, but at the end of the day, if the Democrats are willing to take your right to vote for whoever you want, then we don't have a democracy. And if they can do it to Trump, they can do it to anyone. And that's what they're happy about most, is that they not only get to vote for Trump, but more importantly, their right to vote is protected.
My sentiments exactly, Dave. You sound like a real libertarian, kind of like myself. So I love having you on, Dave. Hopefully, I'll have you on back on in the future. We definitely have to, take a look at your race. Hopefully, you pull through, because I know there's probably going to be some shenanigans they pull there in Colorado, as you saw recently with this. Who knows? He might try to take you off the ballot for some crazy reason. So we need to keep these people in line. You know what I mean? Because they're just out of control. All
I
right,
do.
Dave. I hope to have you on in the future, and God bless. And I'm pulling for you, man. And I hope everybody. You have a website or anything going for your campaign?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Go to daveforcolorado.com. That's Dave, DAVEFOR, Colorado.com. Chip in. We're running against a bunch of globalists who have a lot of money, so every donation helps. If you want us to back up Trump, then please do it. I know you can't vote for me if you're watching from Florida, but know that I can vote for you each and every day I'm in Congress, so please chip in.
All right, and joining us now on the second edition of the Sal Greco Show, fellow Italian-American Civil Rights League board member and Gateway pundit contributor, Paul Ingrassia. How are you, Paul? How's everything?
Hey Sal, it's an honor to be on the Sal Greco Show. We have a lot of news to talk about today, and I'm expecting a very good episode.
I am here too, Paul, because you seem to be routing the money with a few things here. And we're going to start right off here with Paul's tweet this morning that's kind of caught fire here on X. Today's decision really isn't 9-0. You only had 5 justices sign on to Trump's argument. The other 4, or women, deviated in various ways, and the 3 liberals basically said that while states cannot unilaterally remove a president from the ballot, it should not foreclose the federal government, which includes the administrative state and rogue prosecutors like Jack Smith, from doing so. The liberals said, quote, the majority is left with next to no support for its requirements that a Section 3 disqualification can occur only pursuant to legislation for that purpose, end quote. So without legislation, what other federal enforcement mechanisms would allow a president to be removed from the ballot? This is left unanswered by the court's liberals, and furthermore, portends that the court may be less unified in other Trump-related decisions. Paul, for the audience out there that need to know a little bit better what exactly you mean by all that.
First of all, the 9-0 decision is a good look for President Trump in terms of, shaping the narrative. Most people aren't going to go into the weeds of this decision, the reasoning. It looks like a unified court behind President Trump, which it is, on this Colorado state decision. Now, it's actually egregious. It's an egregious indictment on our legal system, on the justice system, and it reflects the weaponized system of justice in this country, that the Colorado decision at the Supreme Court, the state level decision, which was ultimately appealed to the Supreme Court, was actually a split 4-3 decision. I mean, for a case to go that far, where they're basically saying that a state secretary of state could remove the president and thereby override the will of the people, of millions of voters in the state of Colorado who they get to choose as president. And namely, this isn't just, some down ballot, this isn't just like this Robert Kennedy running for office. This is Donald J. Trump, the front runner of both sides of the political aisle, in the presidential contest. So the fact that that court tried to remove him from the ballot is egregious. So it's good to see that the federal court, the Supreme Court here, intervening and correcting that wrong. Part of it is political, part of it is, just logistical. They can't, if they were to rule in the opposite direction, and side with the Colorado court, then their docket would be flooded with, 50 or 100 different cases all across the country. Each one decided by a Secretary of State deciding whether to remove Trump from the ballot, or even maybe in a Republican state, although you don't tend to see this too frequently, Biden from the ballot, just because our DAs and our conservative people tend to be rhinos for the most part, in bed with the Republican establishment. So as far as this decision is concerned, a lot of people, the court was basically unified. It was broken down into 3 separate, spheres, you could say. You had the 5 men on the court, all Republican appointees. You had the Chief Justice Roberts, Alito, Thomas, Gorsuch, and Kavanaugh, all pretty much accepting the president's argument in full, which was that the federal government or a person running for federal office, which a presidential candidate is running for federal office, cannot be removed from the ballot by a state actor, namely a state secretary of state, such as the case in Colorado. So they sided with the president, and they said they're basically that Congress is the one that makes the decision whether any federal office holder gets to be removed from the ballot based on the text of the 14th Amendment. So it's not up to individual states to decide whether someone could be removed from the ballot. It is up to Congress to make that determination. And basically, they also argued that because Congress has not passed a law saying that President Trump, number one, engaged in insurrection, and number two, must be removed pursuant to the 14th Amendment, they have no authority, meaning Colorado has no authority to remove him from the ballot. So the other two sort of sectors of this decision, or two groups of this decision, on one hand, you had Amy Coney Barrett writing a separate concurrence, a very short one-page concurrence, which is basically she signed off with the central holding of the majority, but she also added that, in her opinion, actually is causing a lot of people to sort of raise their, to be a little concerned, because she said, listen, can't we all just get along here? Republicans, Democrats, we're all part of the same team, and we shouldn't get too controversial here. I think she said that the 5 men on the court went too far in saying that there's no law on point that would remove Trump from the ballot. She's like, that's taking it a step too far. Let's just, Congress has already passed sort of legislation that would, determine whether a federal office holder had engaged in insurrection, namely the statute that they're trying to get President Trump on for insurrection. So she said there is already a law on point, but that law has not been enforced against President Trump. So that's kind of—
hold on. Now, Paul, is that normal? Is that now another justice like her?
Yeah.
Giving a side, like she basically gave a whole analogy on her own, separate
Right.
rule. Is that a normal occurrence? Is it just like another? Oh, it's Trump, so we got to do something crazy.
Yeah, well, it's normal for Republicans to always go against Trump, even though they were selected. I mean, she was appointed to the Supreme Court by Donald Trump. And of course, this is a very soft betrayal of President Trump. So, you and I are so familiar with people stabbing Trump in the back on all levels of government. And this is kind of this is yet another example of a judge going against President Trump. You'd never see a Democrat appointed judge, a Biden appointed judge go against him, or an Obama appointed judge go against Biden, or the other way around. So the Democrats are always in lockstep. And not only are they always in lockstep, but they always demand more. So even if they win like a decision, they'll always ask for more. They'll always, like Ruth Bader Ginsburg, the late Ruth Bader Ginsburg, whenever she wrote a majority opinion that would become the law of the land, she would always act like she was dissatisfied. She'd say, well, listen, even though I got my way and I got pretty much everything I wanted, I actually want more than I'm even arguing for in the decision. She'd always do that. Republicans never do that. Instead, they say, we got our holding, but it's a little too much. We don't want to upset the other side. And that's basically what Amy Coney Barrett was saying here. Like, let's try to be nice. I'm a nice woman. I want to be friends with everybody.
That's what I wanted. That's what I was getting to, because Paul, it sounds to me like one justice in particular, who's supposed to be a conservative, or, appointed by Trump, or she's Republican leaning, went out of her way to make this almost like it's about me and my decision. And she did a sidebar on this whole thing, when really all she had to say is yay or nay. And she did, right. She just gave her own spin. So this is kind of like an opinion. Right.
I mean, it was 1 page long, Sal. It was 1 page. So there's no need for it. There was no need for writing this opinion. She could have just signed it.
I've seen the decisions before from the Supreme Court, and I never saw, like, I understand they give dissents, but they're usually very short. You're telling me she
Right.
wrote a page just on this, and I just would like somebody. I guess you can't ask her because she won't answer the question. But my question would be: are you doing this because you have a personal? This is how you feel, or you want everyone to get along, even though that's probably not going to happen. I mean, this is politics, or is this because it
Well,
involves Donald Trump? Because whenever this man's name is invoked or he's involved in something, you get
right.
all kinds of reactions like this. And I think this
Mhm.
is, as a judge, especially as far as law goes, you never interject your feelings in the law. It's here's the law, I'm a judge, here's the opinion, or this is my dissension, period. Not can
Right,
we just
exactly.
get along? I mean, that sounds like a personal feeling if you ask me.
Well, like she's kind of in the John Roberts, the Chief Justice, who we know hates Trump personally, but
Oh, yes.
she's kind of in that camp. She's in that camp where she'll use, oh, we're the court. We want to remain above politics, and by that, what she's basically saying is she doesn't want to get involved in any controversial issues that might help President Trump because her left-wing colleagues on the court might be upset about it, or she'll upset people in Congress, or she'll upset her liberal friends in DC. I
That's
mean,
what
this is a woman.
I know. I'm starting to say that's what I thought because it almost sounds like a partisan shot. She's lean.
Yeah,
She's
it is. It is that.
she's like I'm a conservative or whatever, but I'm a conservative that doesn't like Trump. That's what this sounds like.
When Trump appointed her, I think she was on the DC Court of Appeals, which is the federal appeals court located in DC. It's considered like the most prestigious court right below the Supreme Court. But she was only on that court for like a year. And it was the year during COVID. So she was basically a judge on a federal court for 1 year. You could check me, but I believe it was only 1 year on the Zoom calls. Because back then, like all trials were conducted over Zoom, kind of like what we're
Yes,
doing
I
right
remember
here.
this very
So
well.
that's her experience. That's her federal court experience. Before that, she was a law school professor in Notre Dame Law School in Indiana, South Bend, Indiana. It was a very cushy position. She was kind of isolated from the world. She was on campus, just teaching her law classes, never having to get involved in anything too controversial. So she's used to sort of that academic environment, playing it safe, coddling students, and that's kind of what she wants to do on the Supreme Court. She's not ready for to take the gloves off and to really get involved in the nitty gritty politics and recognize the situation we're in as a country and the crisis we're in as a country. You can't play both sides. You have to take a strong position, and so that's where she comes from. That's why I don't think she's a good pick for Donald Trump,
Yeah,
and I'm not afraid to say that.
and that
But
what you were reading sounds like it. She sounds like she's a
yeah.
anti-Trumper on the court.
So that's her, and then the three liberals, the three Democrat appointed judges, the Biden one and the two Obamas, they wrote a separate concurrence, as they called it. It actually originally may have been a dissent, as we're seeing now on Twitter, but they called it a concurrence. And basically, what they said is today's decision basically would prevent the Colorado Secretary of State from removing Trump from the ballot. But beyond that, we don't want to talk about anything else. We don't want to rule on anything else. So what that says to me, and if you read between the lines, it's pretty clear what they're trying to say here. They're basically saying if Jack Smith convicts Donald Trump of insurrection, then any federal office holder, so this could really be anyone under the Biden regime. So, for example, any federal office holder may be allowed to remove Donald Trump from the ballot. So you might not allow a Secretary of State in Colorado to remove him, but what about the Attorney General appointed by Joe Biden for the state of Colorado? Would he get discretion to remove Trump from the ballot from that state because he's a federal office holder rather than a state official? That's what they're basically saying can be done.
But that question now would be Trump has never been charged with insurrection, so he can never be convicted of insurrection. So
right.
I don't know why this word insurrection keeps coming up. There's nobody charged with this or convicted of this anywhere.
Well, the three liberals, yes, that's true. He's never been convicted. He's never been charged. The three liberals are fully in line with what Jack Smith is doing in DC. They're fully on board with that. they want to see Trump convicted of
course.
insurrection. I can guarantee you that. I can guarantee you that. So they're basically saying if that occurs, then anything could happen now because we don't need to pass additional. Basically, the majority was saying we need to still pass additional legislation to remove Trump from the ballot, even if they indict Trump on insurrection. What they're saying is if Jack Smith determines that Trump is an insurrectionist, then all bets are off. Then anyone could potentially remove Trump from the ballot. So it's a little complicated, but that's basically what they're saying. They're saying we don't need additional legislation from Congress. If Jack Smith determines that Trump is an insurrectionist, and who is Jack Smith? He's just some Biden appointed guy who's tasked with finding Trump to be an insurrectionist. His duty is to read that crime and graft it onto Donald Trump.
He's also constituted illegally as special counsel and has his own case. Bribe somebody, and he's actually a whistleblower. Came out and said that. Those are two things.
And they know that. They know that too. They know he's illegally appointed to be special counsel, but they don't care about that. They're like, all right, he's in that position. He'll convict Trump. It's all illegal, but we're not going to say anything about that.
The rules, the law, they don't apply to these people in charge. That's what it sounds like. That's
not at all. And if he were to convict Trump, then you might have the attorney general for the state. Because Biden gets to appoint an attorney general for every state. Okay. So he appoints like an attorney general for New Jersey, for New York, for Florida, Colorado, and they're all considered federal officials. They're not considered state officials because they're appointed by Biden and they're part of his executive power to appoint attorneys. So those people, you might get some rogue DA or rogue attorney general like Letitia James, whoever it might be that Biden appoints, would then be able to, if they're a federal official, to remove Trump from the ballot, even though they might be isolated to Colorado or wherever they might be. So, I mean, long story short, it's a good decision for Trump. It's good that it appears 9-0 and that people are talking about it as a unanimous verdict. But there's still a lot of, cause for concern based on how a few of the justices have ruled and the reasoning they used in order to sort of evade the central issue regarding who can remove Trump from the ballot and whether he actually engaged in insurrection.
So it's something that you'll see on MSNBC and all the usual suspects saying, well, he's allowed to run, but if we convict him, we're going to get him off regardless. That's basically
right.
They're going to
exactly
with a false narrative and say, oh, this is it's not a real victory. It's a victory for us. One of those moments. Yeah. You wrote this big story here in the Gateway Pundit, and we've been following this story. And it says exclusive: New York State GOP Chairman Ed Cox exposed. GOP leader is a progressive Green New Deal double agent who handpicks bad Republican candidates to lose to his commie pals. We have the receipts. And this article features Mike Sapricone and a picture of Letitia James. Apparently, he's giving money to Letitia James. Over the weekend, I saw that Donald Trump actually endorsed them. He had Rudy Giuliani yesterday. On Sunday, he had his show on WABC. He said he was going to punch this guy in the face because he's a dirty cop. He was a dirty cop. Paul, can you explain all of this? Because this is becoming a circus, and it sounds like it's by design, by certain people, become a circus.
It is, and it really is. Listen, Ed Cox, who runs New York State, the state GOP, is basically senile. He's very similar to Biden right now in terms of his cognitive abilities. But he's an anti-Trump guy. He always backs candidates who oppose Donald Trump, who are rhinos, who are basically Democrats. You saw what happened recently, a couple of weeks ago, for George Santos's seat in New York, the 3rd Congressional District on Long Island and part of Queens. So all of them basically expelled Santos, who was our most conservative, regardless of how you might feel about him. He was the most Trump-supporting conservative member of the New York State House delegation in Congress, without a doubt. So they expelled him. The House goes from a 7-person majority to a 6-person majority. and they run Mazi Khalip, a registered Democrat who would obviously lose, to Tom Suozzi, who had occupied that seat prior to Santos.
They were crying that it was because it snowed that day. It was a snow day. Is that why she
was crying? Well, it's unbelievable because Santos, give him credit. This was a seat that voted 8.2 points. You know, there was rigging, but 8.2 points for Biden, and it went 7.5 points for Santos. So he clearly resonated with the voters there. They nominate Khalip, who can't even speak English, who may not even be a citizen, who's married to this Ukrainian guy who served in IDF or whatever. And she, of course, loses. She loses. She's a horrible candidate. She couldn't even admit who she voted for in 2020, which says she probably voted for Biden. So the worst possible candidate in the world. So you don't think – so setting that precedent, you'd think like they can't get any worse than that. Enter Mike Sapriconi, who's the Republican running against Kirsten Gillibrand, the Democrat senator in New York State in this year's election. So Sapriconi is basically another Democrat. He's a corrupt cop. He's one of the worst. I mean, I know you're a former NYPD guy, Sal. This guy also was NYPD, but he was the worst of the worst. He was a real bad apple here.
He falsely imprisoned someone. Was in jail for 20 years.
Black guy. The city had to settle $3.3 million with this guy because he was falsely imprisoned for more than 2 decades. And $3.3 million is not a small figure. So that's just his background as a cop. That doesn't even go into all the rest that this report uncovered as a result of his political career and donations and affiliations. I mean, this was a guy who donated thousands of dollars to Democrats. He donated thousands of dollars to Tom Suozzi, to Andrew Cuomo, and of course to Letitia James, who's now, persecuting Donald Trump with all these cases. So for them to nominate this guy and to put him up there as the Republican shows that obviously they're not interested in winning this race. But that's not even everything yet. I mean, Ed Cox serves as a board member on this organization called the League of Conservation Voters. This organization gave hundreds of thousands of dollars to Kirsten Gillibrand, the Sapriconi's opponent. So basically, Cox appointed Sapriconi to run against someone that his organization donated upwards of a lot of money to. So there's a major conflict of interest there. I mean, clearly Sapriconi is paid opposition. He's not meant to win. He's controlled opposition. And there's so much more to it. That organization is sponsoring the Green New Deal, these wind turbines that would destroy our environment, or such eyesores are open to national security threats and cyber attacks. So he endorses the environmental agenda, the climate change agenda, all this liberal woke BS. As so many of your viewers, I'm sure, are aware, this is the guy who's appointing the Republicans in New York State. So it's pretty obvious why they always lose, because they're the worst possible candidates you could get.
And I had Gavin Wax on my first show, and he was saying the same thing. He said they only, the GOP in New York, the state GOP, likes to lose. They want to lose, and that's what they're specializing in, losing. What would someone in New York do to change this? What would you do as a New York Republican, as a voter? You're a liberal, you're a libertarian, you're a conservative, you're a Republican. What do you do to change how this party, the GOP, the New York State GOP, how they do business? Because this is outrageous what I'm hearing, that this guy's contributing. This guy's on the board of it's all one corrupt circle where they're only, basically feeding each other.
It's a racket here. And it's similar to what's going on in Georgia with Brian Kemp, the Republican governor, protecting Fani Willis, the DA. It's the same thing here. I mean, for regular voters who might be outraged by this, they could do a few things. One, never donate a single penny to any Republican in New York State again. Number two, call your offices, call your congressional offices, call the office number for, Ed Cox. His Albany headquarters is 518-462-2601. Voice your frustration, voice your outrage, leave a message, send an email. during the general election this year, I would advise all voters to only support Donald Trump and don't vote for any down ballot Republicans in the races. You can peacefully protest in front of their offices, hold up, Donald Trump signs, go on the side of the road, hold up Donald Trump signs, like do stuff like that, grassroots activism. We're trying to put on a few events in New York State, sort of mobilizing grassroots voters who are also extremely frustrated by how the party is running New York State basically to the ground since they're Democrats. They literally are Democrats. They've donated to Democrats. They've nominated Democrats to be Republicans, and they hate Donald Trump. So that says everything. So, we need to turn New York State if it's going to survive, and it's very unlikely given how it's currently being managed. If it is going to survive, we have to make sure the Republicans in New York State are fully lockstep with MAGA, with Donald Trump, or else the party and the state will die.
I'm in complete agreement with you. And I know that some people might say, oh, you're a MAGA extremist, you're a Republican, but that's not the case. I am on an agenda where, look, I'm going to be what's best for the people, whether it be a Republican or a Democrat, right? Whose agenda best serves the people. Now, I know coming from New York, I listen, I was just there. I was a victim of this nonsense there. So for me, I'm saying, look, you got Letitia James, there's Carl Hastings, the head of the assembly there, Darcel Clark, all these people like to all bunch up together at that corrupt place in the Bronx together. I'm wondering if this guy or Ed Cox, maybe they've been to that place having drinks, a straw donor, whatever scheme they're running there. Maybe they're all in cahoots together because they all seem to crisscross in the same paths. But I don't see any Trump people crisscrossing with them. In fact, they seem to be in the crosshairs. That's what this sounds like. And as far as that race goes now, you and I, we always talk offline. I'll tell you this. I'm not a fan of George Santos per se, personally. What I believe, though, is the guy was elected. He already had said that I'm not going to run for re-election. I didn't see the purpose of throwing him out of Congress where you would potentially lose your majority or the extra seat you have that's Republican just because you want to have an axe to grind with someone. Because that seemed like it was more personal than anything else. Yeah. And what happens? He leaves, he's out, and now what do you have? You have Tom Suozzi. Because the person you ran against him, who doesn't even, I heard her. I actually heard her on a Sid Rosenberg show, who, by the way, Sid Rosenberg was heavily endorsing her. Just want to throw that out there. And she didn't speak English well enough. And then Sid Rosenberg himself came out when she lost and said she didn't speak. Like, I couldn't even understand her almost. Well, that's funny, Sid, because you had her on the show and you were praising this woman like she was the second coming of a Madonna or something. She was going to come and save New York State. So you're saying that really if the people could, all these ways they could protest and or at least not stop donating to these GOP, these rhino GOP. Because I read this article. This is pretty damaging. So how do we go? Like, Trump endorsed this guy. Now what do we do? Because Rudy was up in arms about this yesterday.
Rudy was up in arms about this, and rightfully so. I think Trump may not have had all the information about what's going on here on the ground in New York State. I mean, he is obviously and understandably involved in a lot of different issues at one time. He has these trials that are still going on. He's trying to win back the country or win back a presidential race and focus on 50 states at one time. So I can understand if he's not sort of in the sort of nitty-gritty details of what's going on here in New York as we are. But and also in fairness to Sid, he also came out against Sapriconi. Even Sapriconi was so bad a candidate that even Sid Rosenberg had something negative to say about her. And not just Sid, but Peter King, who's a Nikki Haley, who's a former congressman in New York State. He's a Nikki Haley supporter. He remains an anti-Trump Nikki Haley guy. He's Joe Cairo's basically right-hand man. But even he called for Sapriconi to resign. So I don't know really what's going on there with him, whether he's genuine about that or whether he's trying to play politics and protect his friend. whatever the case may be. But you do have some pretty heavy hitters in New York state politics, Republican state politics, who are calling for Sapercone's resignation. It's interesting you mentioned also George Santos, because all these guys were saying how corrupt Santos is, how much of a criminal he is, how much of a scumbag he is, and yet they're all happy rallying around such a corrupt cop that has multiple charges against him, that forced the city to pay over $3.3 million in a settlement. I mean, talk about corruption. That's far worse than anything Santos was ever accused of doing. And they all know that Santos really was on their radar not because of his lies or his fabrications or whatever else he may have done. It was because he stood out against them. He stood out against Joe Cairo. He stood out against the Republican establishment, which made him easy bait for them to then latch on to everything else in his background and use that to justify his ouster from Congress.
I'm going to hit you with one last one. I don't know if you know anything about the Bob Menendez case at all. He's the senator from New Jersey, and recently his co-defendant pleaded guilty and is cooperating against him in the Southern District of New York. And the only reason I bring this up is Bob Menendez had a lot of things to say, not only about President Trump, but our friend Roger Stone. So, what are your thoughts on all of that going down with the because remember, he was a big Trump impeachment guy. He was a big supporter of that. There's no evidence to that, and he's claiming that Trump was lockstep with Russia and all this stuff. And meanwhile, this guy's taking money, gold bars. Now he's got his co-defendant is now a cooperating witness against. So what do you think about that? How do you think that's going to go, that little case with Bob Menendez?
Democrats protect their own while Republicans throw their guys under the bus. I mean, Bob Menendez for so long has been known to be the most or one of the most corrupt members of Congress of either party. I mean, I remember reporting down there for the Daily Caller. This was before law school. This was like in 2018, 2019. Just trying to ask him a question. If you run into him in the hallway, he actually threatened to punch me, beat me up. I had it on audio, and that was like the first time I ever got featured on Tucker Carlson because of how much of a scumbag this guy is. So that's how he treats reporters. He didn't even know who I was or what I was going to ask him. He just said, you're garbage, you're trash, get away from me. I'm going to beat the bleep out of you. So that's how Bob Menendez is. And of course, a guy like that who represents himself like that to reporters would be corrupt. I mean, go figure. I mean, it's not a shock. So, that's it. We'll just see how this materializes. I think Democrats will protect their own, though, because they have, I'm sure, a lot of blackmail on him, much as he does on them. And he's been there for a while. So for better or worse, he's like, the elder statesman in the party where they all look up to him. And his son is in there too.
Yeah, to see years ago, this guy was every day I was with Roger. He used to tell me, you believe this guy Menendez? Because he knew that Roger can't speak or defend himself on the gag order. And this guy's taking shot after shot after shot. Meanwhile, he was going to court in New Jersey during that first trial where you saw him. And now he's being indicted. Not only he's worse today than he was back then. And he's definitely facing, like, this is the swan song for him now. And he's still sitting there, and I want to see how is he the head of the foreign committee? I don't even know how he's allowed to be on any of those committees. You should be taken right off of that right now. But that's a whole another subject, because these guys always, look out for themselves. Paul, where can people reach you and check you out on Twitter? What's your handle? What's your website? Gateway Pun? Give it all to the public.
So my Twitter handle is Paul Ingrassia, at Paul Ingrassia, one word. And then Substack, follow me on Substack, the most retruthed Substack or articles of any writer, as far as I'm aware, from President Trump. PaulIngrassia.substack.com, PaulIngrassia.substack.com.
That's my fellow board member of the Italian-American Civil Rights League, Paul Ingrassia, fellow Sicilian. He's proud of it. As you can hear, he's better than most lawyers that you'll hear, but he definitely knows everything that's legal, what's going on. He knows everything political. I would definitely follow him, keep up with Paul, and you'll see what's going on, not only in Trump world, but in the world in general. Paul, thanks for coming on, and I hope to see you come back very soon. Well, I'm sure we'll be seeing you soon.
Absolutely, Sal. It's a pleasure.
And also, we have coming on right now my friend, an investigative reporter, and someone who's running for the U.S. Senate in New York State, who's a patriot and a hero, and definitely a huge advocate for the January 6 prisoners who are stuck in a gulag right now. Cara Castronuova, welcome to my show, Cara.
Thank you for having me, Sal.
Cara, I know you heard that whole spiel about the illegal immigrants and the migrants running around and undocumented running around New York City. You've been following that too. What do you say about all that going on with Eric Adams, how he's handling that, how the migrants are just running rampant in New York City causing crime?
Well, it's a big problem. Eric Adams, Joe Biden, and all of their goons are the ones that caused it. Obviously, it's a huge problem here in New York, especially in New York City, especially in, the areas surrounding New York City. I'm out on the street as a reporter talking to people every single day. And it's the thing that's on most people's minds. A lot of minority community, a lot of people that live here underneath the poverty level in New York, and there are a lot, especially in the city, are just completely feeling betrayed that their government is putting illegal immigrants before them. People's food stamps are running out. There's homeless veterans living on the streets. They're closing down schools and housing migrants there, and people are just absolutely fed up. The majority of my friends are liberal because I grew up in New York on the borderline of Queens, and I have all of them telling me they're voting Republican. How can I register to vote Republican this year? It's real. It's happening. New York State is going to turn red in 2024.
That's exactly what I want to ask. If you think New York State, is there a chance that it turns red? I mean, with all this going on, you would think, it makes sense to say this isn't working. We need to return to some law and order here, because I understand that all these migrants are a problem. Some of them want to look for work, but you have like these Venezuelan gang members that are all over New York City causing havoc. I mean, something has to be done here, Cara.
Something has to be done. I mean, we need to obviously get President Trump back in office. We need to get more Republicans in the Senate. I'm running for Senate in Congress to start writing bills and passing legislation that makes all of this illegal, as it should be. And the people need to really use their voice. I think that people feel like the government has left them, that it's not a government of we the people, that it's just a couple people making decisions at the top. But if the people start voicing and the people start speaking out, and that I really think that's the way to do it. People have to just start voting more, and they have to start running for office at the local level, at the state level, and even at the federal level, like I am. This government is supposed to be run by the people, and it's not supposed to. I believe in term limits. There's people that have been in government for way too long, and that includes the person I want to run against, which is Kirsten Gillibrand. She's been in office for a number of terms. She was appointed when Hillary Clinton, dropped out of Senate when she wanted to run for president. So I think that it's time that more people like myself start running for office and exposing really the corruption from within.
I did see you running for Senate against Kirsten Gillibrand, who inherited, or I think she took that seat over from Hillary Clinton, if I remember correctly. So, I don't know if you saw the SCOTUS ruling, which I was referenced to. What are your thoughts on that? I saw Paul Ingrassia gave me he ran this all down, how it was 5 justices that actually technically the males voted for Trump, and the other 4 kind of dissented a little bit on that. So he was saying it's a victory, but not so much victory as we think. But also this, I think, there might be something in line towards the ruling on that 1512 hearing of the January 6th prisoners. So maybe you could give the audience a little bit of insight on all that.
Well, I mean, I have to really read the decisions. I think that when you read decisions and people's writing on the Supreme Court, you see who they really are. Because I remember back in New York when they had that emergency hearing with the Supreme Court, when they were closing down the schools and churches, I read Brett Kavanaugh's opinion, which even though he sided with the conservatives, I thought it was a very interesting opinion, to say the least. So I'm interested to read the opinions of the justices on this Trump thing. I'm relieved that the liberal justices actually followed the law and said what was going on in Colorado was obviously unconstitutional. So I think that the left is probably going crazy. I don't watch CNN and I don't watch MSNBC, but I can only imagine that they're losing their minds on there. When it comes to the ruling that's coming up in April, there's a really big case and it's going to turn everything upside down, just like this one did today. That's the ruling on 1512, which a lot of the January 6th prisoners are in jail for right now, have been given 20-year sentences. It's another ruling I think that's going to really change the playing field for Donald Trump, because the reason why they charge a lot of these poor men and women from January 6th with 1512 was because it has a 20-year jail time as a maximum. And they really wanted to be able to set a precedent and find a number of men and women across the country guilty or have them plead to 1512 obstruction of justice, which doesn't even apply to what happened on January 6th, because then they wanted to have that precedent when they took Donald Trump to court in Washington, D.C. for his January 6th case. So they could charge Donald Trump with 1512, say, look, we found these Oath Keepers, we found these Proud Boys guilty. All of these men and women, pled guilty to 1512. So why is Donald Trump above the law? But in actuality, 1512 applies really to shredding documents, and it was made after Enron, when people shred documents and destroyed evidence. It applies nothing whatsoever to anything that happened on January 6th, and the only reason that they're charging people with it is because of that really heavy 20-year penalty when it has nothing to do with what happened that day.
Cara, actually, if I recall, this 1512 charge was originally used in an Enron case. And the
Right.
Enron case, if you remember, the architect of that was Andrew Weissman. So I believe his fingerprints are on this one also. To charge them, I believe that it's got to do with ripping up documents, but nobody even touched these documents in regards to January 6th. I think it was a severe overreach, and that's a way to say, well, we're going to hook a felony on these people, because basically I think this is more, a lot of people, if you didn't hit a police officer or break a window, all you have is trespass, right? And in New York, I remember what a trespass was. Lucky if you got a summons. The worst you would get is 30 days in jail if you're like a 10-time felon. But if it's just a first-time offense, it's a slap on the wrist and a fine, if that. But they made some of these people into like felons, and God forbid.
Right.
And I don't agree with that stuff. And
It's terrifying.
Whether people agree or disagree with how, people went in there, didn't go in the building, the overreach of the government should be alarming. And you've done an excellent job on highlighting all of this, and it's come to the forefront. And I believe that this 1512 charge that they've been charged, which they also charged President Trump on, how does that case go forward if now this gets overturned? Because that's the next question.
It doesn't go forward, and it's another victory for Donald Trump. All of these bogus cases, kangaroo court cases against him are going to get, just knocked down one by one. And just to put like that 1512, so people really understand, if somebody, let's just say steals candy from a store, you can't charge them with murder. That's literally what this is the case. So somebody walked into the Capitol and they might have trespassed, and that's also questionable because the trespassing charge is very questionable if people really were trespassing that day. But let's say at worst they were trespassing or being civilly disobedient. There's actually a charge for people. There's a charge, I forget the name of it, but there's an actual something they could have charged them with for going into the Capitol, but it has a very small jail time and it's not a felony. So you can't just say you walked into the Capitol, therefore we could just make up any charge. Let's pull one off of a tree. Let's charge them with murder. That's not the way it works. And the Supreme Court's going to see right through that, because there's actually a crime that they could have charged them with, which is like going into the congressional building and trespassing, but they opted not to. They got greedy because they wanted to scare the living daylights out of Americans and say, this is what happens if you disagree with the government. If you disagree with the regime, you're going to get thrown in jail. The key is going to get thrown away. Nobody's going to care, and there's nothing you could do about it. So next time that you want to call for election integrity, maybe you should think twice about that, because you're going to go to jail for decades. And that's really what that was about.
Yeah, so this is what people need to hear. The more they hear, because you do speak a lot, but I don't think people know enough about what you're doing. And this is important. I want people to understand, because Cara's a big advocate for all this. This is how she became a national figure, is that she put a spotlight on this. And without Cara, you probably would have been a lot worse than just 1512. They probably would have tried to put people in for like 50 years for something they never even did. So I just want that highlighted. And so, Cara, where can people donate to, let's say, on your campaign or see anything that you're writing about? Because you also write for the Gateway Pundit.
Or you can read my articles on the Gateway Pundit, and you can also go to my Twitter at Cara Castronuova, follow me for updates, and go to Cara for Senate. My name is spelled with a C-A-R-A, spelled out for F-O-R, Senate.com. Please make a donation. I'm really trying to, go out there and fight as hard as I can for the people. I am a populist candidate. I'm here to fight for the people. I'm here to fight for the people who feel like they have no voice in New York. You, Sal, live here in New York, and there's a lot of conservatives, or you lived here in New York City and in the suburbs that are very red, but are afraid of being canceled. They don't want to lose their jobs. It's really disgusting what's going on here in New York. Then we have all of upstate. There's so many counties that are just red as can be, and they're not represented, and it's because we don't have the candidates that could win. And I'm a candidate that could actually win, go down to Washington DC and make some real changes for this country and for New York. So please check me out. Go on my website, Cara for Senate, so you can see what I'm about, and please continue to read the Gateway Pundit, and also all of the work that I've done there in the past. Go look up my past articles on talking about the January 6th prisoners. That over 3 years after January 6th, I think it's going on 3 years and a few months now, there's still men in jail right now in Washington, D.C., Gitmo, who have not had a trial, and they've been there for over 3 years, literally like it's communist China. It's very sad. It's very scary. For those of you who aren't aware, do some more reading on that.
And also check out on Newsmax. I know you're on Wise Guys. I always watch.
Yes, I'm on a hold right now on Wise Guys because I am running for office. Right now, I had to take a leave of absence, and I'll be back 7 years after I get into the Senate. That's what I say. I want to do one term. I don't believe in 2-3 terms. I think it needs to keep changing. I think new ideas and younger people need to keep coming in, because people can't get too comfortable in there. And that's really what I believe. Term limits is one of the most important things we need to start really looking at with legislation in this country.
Cara, I'm always behind you. I'm on your side. For people that don't actually know this, when I was going through my NYPD department trial, my witch hunt, and they were accusing me of all these crazy things, it was Cara that was in the back reporting on this. It was her and the Daily News. That's it. That's the only people that were there. And Cara was the only one that she actually broke some stuff that happened during that trial. Cara's my friend. I would tell you, if I was in New York, I would vote for her. If I was in New York, I would donate to her. She's loyal to people like me. That means she's going to be loyal to people like you, especially the voters. So I would vote. I would go on the website, give whatever you can, contribute, help Cara out. Follow her on the Gateway Pundit. I used to watch her on Wise Guys because I got to wait for that, because she was great on Wise Guys. She went around. She was at my friend's place in Little Italy at Baby John. So it's great. Cara, I hope for the best. I wish you the best for you, and I really want to see you get in the Senate and make change. So, and I hope to have you back, and we'll talk further along as your campaign goes along.
Thank you so much, Sal.
All right, that's about all the time we have here on the Sal Greco Show for the second episode of the Sal Greco Show. If you found our discussion very informative, if you like what you see, click on the links below, subscribe to the channel, spread the word, tell everybody about what you saw, help spread the show, make the show grow. And if you want to follow me, you can follow me on Twitter at The Sal Greco. Same could be said on Instagram at The Sal Greco, and also on Truth Social at Head of the Table. And we're going to see you in the next one. Ciao for now.